Hello and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. We're going to be talking to you about something that's been on our minds. I'm going to start off with saying a little bit about the Walkthrus professional development package that I've been writing, and the common question we get, which is where do we start? As a way of talking a little bit about how you get started with any kind of professional development program.
And I'm going to be talking about mistake making and the importance of how you make your mistakes. We're also going to be talking to Principal Kafele, which is an absolutely fabulous interview later in the show. So sit back and enjoy. I'm going to talk to you about making mistakes. Now, I've got a fantastic colleague and his name is Phil Page. And he has this great saying. He says, some you win, some you learn. And he told me this a couple of years ago, and he tells it to all our initial teacher education students, and I've nicked it off him shamelessly, but I always credit him with it. And I use it wherever I go now to talk about managing change and managing challenge and then making mistakes during that process. Because if we're going to make any changes to our own practice or challenge a status quo or change anything in an establishment, all of that will normally come from either a setback or a period of reflection. And in my book, Be More Toddler, I talk about my own middle daughter when she was a toddler saying, I'm making a mistake with the saying, red sky at night. Because obviously the saying is red sky at night, shepherd's delight. And she said, red sky at night, angel delight, which is the name of a dessert over here in the UK. But she didn't react badly when that error was made. Because most people's errors, if they make an error, they're rarely deliberate. And especially in teaching, where we put a staggering amount of energy and thought and time into what we do, people don't make errors on purpose. So as leaders or kind of activists within change management, we need to be mindful of that. So if we're coaching or we're leading, what we need to do is have a discussion around the error, not pointing out constantly what the error was in somebody else's work. I didn't say to my daughter, no, that's completely wrong. That's dreadful. That's wrong. We talked about what the error was, how it might be different, what her understanding of it was, because it's from positive discussions around errors that you get growth and change, not from shutting people down. And if we create a culture of a fear of failure, we'll have no creativity and no movement in our organisations, because change has to come from a period of reflection or a period of evaluation. But as a leader, what we need to have is an appreciation that that change will probably be incremental. And I talk in my book about how toddlers learn to speak. They don't learn to speak in full sentences to start with. It's one word, then a group of words, then a whole sentence. And we don't berate them when they first start that development because they're not speaking in full sentences. We celebrate what's been learned with them, not fixate on what they're doing wrong. So we need to recognise as leaders in schools, whenever we're trying to change anything or develop anything or move things along, that there will be misinterpretation, there will be misalignment, there will be misapplication, and sometimes there'll just be a plain error. But what we need to do is unpick those with a shared understanding of actually what we're trying to achieve together. And to do that, we need to model that we are not infallible, that during that process that we're learning too. And recognise as leaders that mistakes don't happen if we're doing something mundane or we're doing something procedural. And mistakes happen when we're doing new things. And when we're doing new things, that means we're doing exciting things. And I can sort of, yes, I definitely agree with this. Creativity lies on the border of chaos. And if we're doing something creative and we're doing something new and we're doing something different, there will be a period where everything feels like it's a little bit chaotic. And so we as leaders need to say, actually, maybe this is the point at which we need to kind of rather nimbly, rather humbly change tack, change course if necessary, and be honest about our own capabilities and the capabilities of the procedures around the people around us. And we need to make sure that we are not trying to be perfection personified. We need to model that we are the learners in the organisation as well as the leaders. So we do need to be optimistic, we do need to be ambitious, but we also need to be honest. We need to have absolute clarity about what we're doing and be really realistic and humble about the changes that we're trying to make in school. We also need to be willing to get involved and kind of to have a go and to maintain that positive, courageous approach to making change. especially when things aren't necessarily working. And it kind of brings me all the way back round to when things aren't going well, is to remember what Phil says: some you win, some you learn.
Hello, everybody. This section is about something that's been on my mind recently, which is the feedback we're getting from some of the people that have been buying into the Walkthrus professional development package, which is something that I've produced over the last few months with my partner, Oliver Caviglioli. We made these books here, which some of you may have seen. And it started off as a book. It started off as an idea to sort of set out various ideas to do with teaching in 5 steps that people can then use as a reference point for various professional discussions. But actually, what we found is that schools are often after quite a lot of guidance about what to do with the ideas in the bigger scope of a professional development program that runs across the whole school year. And the question we get asked more than anything else is, where do we begin? And that to me is really interesting, because what it suggests is that when people have got a lot of possibilities, sometimes it can get bogged you down. You can start thinking, we could do this or we could do that. And you just need someone to say, just do it like this, as a kind of starting point and point people in the right direction. And so really what we've been saying to people is, you can't actually take a thing off the shelf and deliver it. We can't actually give you the thing that you want, which is a recipe. It really just doesn't work that way. Because then you would be constantly second guessing, constantly thinking, what are we supposed to be doing? And right from the beginning, we're saying that really this is a hurdle you kind of need to work your way through, which is to take ownership of it, read the stuff, see what's there, and to start building a program which fits you, fits your school, fits your staff, fits your students. So really the place to begin is to decide what you think you need. And that really is at the level of the students. What things do they typically find difficult? What things do you feel that your teachers find difficult to deliver in the lessons? And it could be questioning strategies, it could be assessment procedures, it could be the fact that the children seem to do well in class, but then they don't do well on tests, and it could be to do with them forgetting things. There's lots of different elements. So you've got to start with a kind of, where are we? What do we need? What are our biggest challenges? When we walk around our school and watch lots of lessons, what are the things that we see teachers do that seem to be working well? And where do we feel there are common areas where they're actually struggling a little bit, or where there are children in the pockets, in the corners struggling? And that's the hard bit. Now, someone from the outside like me writing a book can't tell you those things. You have to kind of begin with what you can see. And then you start matching and saying, okay, well, if that's our problem, this is maybe the solution we need. If that's the problem, maybe this is the solution that we need. And start forming a program around that. And I always think there needs to be 2 elements to that. One of them is a common set of ideas that everybody is discussing. And that you need that so that there's a kind of sense of common purpose and a common language. So, for example, you could say, we're all going to work on a couple of questioning strategies, maybe the one called check for understanding. That's a good one. Let's all do that, because if a lot of us are working on that, then we'll be discussing it, we'll be sharing ideas about it. But then you can't have too much of that. If teachers feel like all I do with my professional development is kind of the thing which I have to do, they don't feel like it's about them. They just think it's about the school system. So as well as a thread of common development, you also need teachers to select things that are genuinely their own. And that is usually best done through a kind of coaching discussion with somebody who knows them well, who's seen them teach, who knows how well their students are doing, and can help them formulate a plan and says, this is my plan, and this is what I'm going to work on this year. And then you've got that twin track approach, the whole school approach and the individual approach, which hopefully will complement each other. And then you've got people feeling, yeah, okay, I can move forward in this year. And the walkthroughs are just one way of kind of supporting that. They're just a reference point, which we hope people will develop. So that's what's been on my mind, a sort of interesting dilemma of people wanting kind of solutions, but almost not quite being prepared to take that step, which is to say, yeah, this is my thing, and kind of own it a little bit. And maybe that to sweat it out a little bit in the early stages to really get to grips with something before they get started. So if you're out there and you want to think about walkthroughs, then check it out. It's something you might be interested in as well. I'm sure you'll hear me talk about it again in the future. You can see It's on my t-shirt and everything. Thank you. Emma Turner and I are going to be talking to Principal Baruti Kafele, who is a fantastically inspiring educator from the United States. We're really thrilled to have you with us this morning.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
And I have to say, I've been picking up on some of the stuff you've been doing, and I watched one of your Saturday morning shows that you did recently where you talked about, well, it sounded like pretty much the first book you'd ever read when you were about 23 at college. And then it's one of the most fantastic things I've ever heard someone say, which was that when you finished the book, you were a different person to when you started on page one. And I just really got me. And that was fantastic. And so I kind of wanted to kick off with this idea of this sense of, I don't know, your sense of kind of being on a mission and the sense of social justice linking with leadership. Just a bit of an open, really. So tell us kind of the sort of things that make you passionate about what you do.
Yeah, well, it really goes back to that book, because prior to reading that book, social justice, which really wasn't the terminology, social justice education, that was used in school settings at that time. But reading that book just kind of told me, it dictated for me where I need to position myself within my life. So when I soon after decided that I wanted to become a teacher, that was my foundation. It was all I knew. So social justice education was who I was as a teacher from the outset, from day one. So 10 years later, when I become a principal, it's still my foundation. It's all I know. So I don't know, in a figurative way, I don't know that I'm doing things a little differently than other people, so to speak. This just seems natural to me, that I tie everything that we're doing into the classroom to the world outside of the classroom, relative to being that social justice educator, relative to bringing those equitable classroom practices and subsequently leadership practices to a school. So it's all rooted in reading that book. And for the listeners, To Kill a Black Man by Lewis Lomax, a book about the lives of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, with a focus on the parallels between their two lives.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fantastic. And I was going to ask you whether you feel like, because you do all these talks, and you have, if I can say from a British perspective, a kind of evangelical style, and you have this whole thing. You say things like, "Somebody hear me," and it's got this kind of preacher aspect to it, which I just think is fantastic. But do you kind of preach this stuff to your listeners? Are you trying to get everyone else to be social justice educators as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And we, even on one of the Saturday broadcasts, in fact, it was the week that George Floyd was murdered. Here I was getting ready to do a Saturday talk, preparing for it, and my spirit wouldn't allow me to do what I had planned to do. So I told the folks, I guess a day ahead of time, on a few posts, that I'm going to shift gears for this one, and we're going to talk social justice education. So a lot of people thank me, because they said they weren't really prepared emotionally to hear what I normally would have talked about. They needed to be in the same space. So we were all in the same place. And I spent the hour or so just dealing with that, dealing with the issue at hand, George Floyd and the social unrest that ensued from it, but also just talking about how we take that and bring it back into a classroom, because there are real students entering school. Whenever schools reopen, or if they're going to be back on the computer screen, there will be real students there. Do we ignore what's happening in the world? Do we sweep it under the rug? Do we sugarcoat it? Do we pretend that it didn't happen? Or do we embrace it and weave it into what we're doing, whether it be across math, science, social studies, language arts, whatever it is? We don't run away from it and hide from it, but we make it a part of what we do. And I think that enriches the youngster that much more, but it also enriches the educator, because there's certain things that an educator has to do. Let me just give you this one example, even though I know you've got quite a few questions to ask me. When I jumped on social media early this morning about 6:30, there was a tweet that just warmed my soul. I had written a post right during the time of social unrest about the fact that so many teachers, so many educators who happen to be white, it was 100% of white educators who were asking me for book recommendations. And I decided that I was going to take the liberty of not suggesting what they were asking for, which were books on racism, systemic racism, white privilege, white supremacy, those types of things. I said, I want them to read history to understand contemporary racism. So I recommended books that go back, that take the reader back beyond 1619, meaning the start of enslavement in America, beyond that, African civilizations, and then working my way back to America, 1619, and then throughout all the way to the new millennium. So I narrowed the list, because I gave an extensive list, to two books. And a lot of folks have been posting, they've been ordering the books. Introduction to African Civilization by an author by the name of John G. Jackson, and Before the Mayflower, an author by the name of Lerone Bennett Jr. And many have been posting the covers of the book, meaning that they got them, and now they're going to go ahead and dive deep into them. And that's a beautiful thing, because if it wasn't for the recommendation I made, I would dare say they probably would have never known that these books were ever written. And these are old books; these are classic books. But because of a guy in Jersey City, New Jersey, going on his computer and saying, "Why don't you read this?" And now folks are posting, I got my books and I'm reading them. And now, and what that does is give them a different perspective on the people that happen to be African-American that they see every day. See, but don't know them historically, don't know them culturally, and particularly beyond the shores of America. So I threw that into your question because it's relevant.
No, good for you.
But I just kind of went a little further.
You know, Emma, I don't know, you're going to be, we're all championing a bit with our questions, but one of the things that touched me in a video I said earlier was how yourself, when you were a student, you moved schools and stuff as a kid, and you were present but not seen. Like you didn't feel that you were seen, and I felt that is something which, you know, I was thinking, you know, do we see the kids for who they are, and probably we don't. And that's something which one of our previous guests, Sonia Thompson, talked about as well. It's so interesting. Anyway, so for me, the message you gave was just fantastic, and I'm thrilled. I'm going to pick up those two recommendations for books just now. Yeah. Emma, let's go over to you now.
I was just thinking about something I was going to ask, and this is absolutely seamless, because I was watching one of your YouTube clips earlier, and you was talking about education, and you said, what a great mission. What a great mission to be an educator and an education leader. That really struck a chord with me, because to me, a mission is an adventure with a plan. Yeah. And I'm thinking, you know, that's what teaching is. That's what teaching and leading of teaching is. It's an adventure with a plan. And then I was thinking about something else you said, and one of your other things, which was about the challenges and the promises presented by millennial learners. And I was thinking, that's amazing, because there is no greater adventure or mission than the future, really. So, and that kind of ties in with all the things you've been saying just now. So what do you think are the kind of those challenges and promises that are presented by our learners at the moment? You talk about what's in the news at the minute, but
yeah, the younger generation, and I guess I dealt with the same thing when I was the younger generation. It's a different animal, and I read, I hear the critiques that they give of my generation, particularly the activists, and there's a disconnect often that, look, we don't need your ways of doing things. We're doing things our way. And yet those in my generation are saying, but we're the ones who have been here, and we've got a certain level of experience and wisdom that we want to share with you. So now when you take that and bring it into a classroom space, it's the same thing, particularly when you're talking middle school, grade 6 and up, because they've formulated their own way of thinking. They see the world the way they see it. And the question is, as teacher, do I know their world? Do I understand their world? Have I been able to adapt to their world? So with me, I'm 59. I'll be 60 in 3 months, and I'm counting, right? And the thing about it, I prided myself on staying abreast with youth culture over the years, over the decades. So as I was getting much older, that gap was widening and widening. I said, I still got to be in tune with their world, their music, particularly their movies, their television shows. So the music, and we know that hip hop music is not confined to Black kids. You know, the largest consumer of hip hop music are white children, right? So I said, I have to know that music. I've got to know the lyrics. I've got to know the latest groups that come out. I gotta know the gossip behind the music, right? Because I've got to be able to relate to them in terms of their world toward bringing them to where I am, right? So, but if I'm so disconnected and their world is here, put myself on the screen, their world is here and my world is here, and we're so separate from one another, then it makes it different to make those connections. So I say to teachers all the time, you've got to learn their world so that they can ultimately relate to you, as hopefully you'll be able to relate to them.
That's really interesting. One of the first things I did with my early career teachers recently was I gave them a load of names. And they were the names of children's cartoon characters that they wouldn't necessarily know unless they were a kid that was watching. I was like, who is so-and-so and who is so-and-so? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I was like, you've got to get that cultural zeitgeist bit right. You've got to connect. And that kind of leads me into something else that I was watching of yours, which said about your presence as a leader on your school website.
Yeah.
Business about, I want to know you. I want to know about you. So my kind of question was, if we're not in school at the moment, and if we are at home in lockdown or whatever, how can leaders and educators still connect with their students so that they feel like they are known, that they know their children and the children know them?
Yeah, you know, I say to leaders every day on this computer that you're in a virtual setting, and I have no reason to believe that schools are going to reopen in August and September, as many governors in the states here are saying will, not with the way that states are spiking. So I say to them, I said, therefore, while you're home, your home is your main office of your school. So where I'm sitting now, if I was principal, this would be the main office of the school. So now going back to your question, how do I connect? Every day, I'm saying to principals that I've never met a teacher that looks forward to staff meetings. And some schools staff meetings are only once a month. Other schools, they're every week. It varies with schools and negotiated contracts. So I said, but during this pandemic, you cannot afford to have a meeting with your staff once a week or once a month. You've got to figure out a way that you've got your staff on this screen 5 days a week. Doesn't have to be a lengthy meeting, but you need time to connect with your staff. Because if you've got 1,000 kids, you got 500 kids, you've got 200 kids, you're not going to connect with those individual students every day. That's an impossibility. But what's possible is that you can connect with staff every day. So now staff, you've got your entire staff on a Zoom call, and you can scroll back and forth to see them all. Now you can engage them in the conversation. Tell me what's happening with instruction with your students. Tell me what's happening emotionally with your students. Tell me some of the things that you're hearing that students have disclosed to you about the challenges that they're facing at home. So now you can have that back and forth conversation with your staff. If you've got staff members that would rather speak to you privately, you can do that. But as long as you have connection with your staff on a regular basis, now you are a part of the school. But let's say one day goes by, 24 hours goes by, and you haven't spoken to anybody on that staff. That means that for an entire day, you were completely disconnected, detached from your school, while your school still did whatever it did. The school still happened. You just weren't a part of it. And see,
so other people are doing that.
I've got to be a part of it. Say that again.
Do you find other people are managing to do that? Or
most of them, in terms of the feedback I get, it's like an aha moment, and folks are saying, I hadn't thought about that. There are days that I don't know what happened with my school. Yeah. So that's because you didn't have that meeting. I'm saying if I was principal, the most important part of my day would be that meeting when I've got my entire staff, because it's twofold. On the one hand, I want to hear from them. But on the other hand, I want to provide them with information. And that information may come in the form of inspiration, right? It may come in the form of encouragement. It may come in the form of empowerment, but it gives me an opportunity to just give my word, my staff, my words, give them that support, let them remind them or reinforce the support. Just letting them know that I'm here, right? But by the same token, letting me know what's happening with them and the students.
I sense that sense of, you know, and you're obviously very comfortable with it. Like, you have this sort of Saturday morning academy, aren't you? You're running this thing for leaders. I can tell you're at ease in that chair with your.
I'm very at ease.
Broadcasting.
And you know, the reason, because the reason I've responded that way is because everybody says that to me, right? Particularly my speaker colleagues who tell me they struggle with it. They say, you don't seem like you're struggling with this. I said, but you have to remember something. I've been doing YouTube videos since they invented YouTube, right? So I've been doing, you know, that's why I have so many videos. So I've been doing this so long. It's like I was rehearsing for this moment, right? So now, when this moment came, it was natural for me. So I was ready. You know, so I got a 3-hour presentation to do right after this one, and I got with the same school for the next 3 days, and you know, I'm very comfortable in this space. I miss my audiences, but I'm comfortable in this space.
Well, let me ask you about this. Is one of the things that you're really known for is your focus on developing the AP roles, assistant principals, and I think in England we might be deputy head teachers or middle leaders as a whole range of people, but not the principal. And so I'm so interested in this because for me, I mean, I think Emma and I would agree with that role is probably, when we've done it ourselves, it's one of the most rewarding jobs that you can do. My wife is currently in that role, and why is it so important to you? Why is it so? Why is it such an important role?
Yeah, it became important to me when I was in that role. Here I went from being I was the teacher of the year for my school, for my district, for the county, and I was a state finalist for New Jersey Teacher of the Year. So I had been, you know, they tell me I was doing it at a high level. So now here I am. Superintendent decides he's going to make me an assistant principal mid-year. So right after the holiday break, January 2nd, I'm in a new capacity. So I'm saying goodbye to my kids for the first half of the year. So now all of us, so I've got that energy with me, right? So now all of a sudden, I'm a full-time disciplinarian. Well, I wasn't a disciplinarian as a teacher because I understood the power in a climate and culture. So now the climate and culture were my disciplinarians. So I never had those kinds of issues. So now all of a sudden I'm in this role where I'm putting kids in detention. I'm putting kids in suspension. I'm suspending kids. I'm preaching and lecturing the kids about behavior all day. And that wasn't my world prior to coming to that position. But by the same token, I've got 30 teachers that I have to evaluate. Said differently, that I have to supervise plus evaluate. When am I going to see them? Here's the answer. Never, right? Except for when it's time to actually write the evaluation. Well, I'll slide in there real quick, do a quick observation, write the evaluation. And ultimately what I'm doing is I'm doing the teacher a disservice. I'm doing the student a disservice. I'm doing the parents a disservice. I'm doing a whole community a disservice because I have just rewarded somebody based on watching them for 10 minutes, right? So now that stayed with me. So when I became a principal, which was the very next year, so obviously I had no training in becoming a principal. I knew nothing about it, but the superintendent knew my skill set from my teaching days. So I said, I can't replicate that with the assistant principals that I have, right? So then over the next 14 years of principal leadership, that always bothered me, my year as an assistant principal. So finally, I guess within the past year or two, I started writing about the assistant principal because I had never I kept writing about the principal. I said, that assistant principal is being ignored by not only me, but everybody. There's no books out there for the assistant principal. There's no graduate school courses that I know of for the assistant principal. Everything is training students for the principalship. I said, let me write a very easy to read, self-reflective, short book that the assistant principal can use as a guide. And but also that the principal can use as a guide, because the assistant principal, if he or she's been assigned to be a full-time disciplinarian, it's not as if I can take myself out of that and become something else if that's what the principal said I have to be. But a lot of those discipline problems have nothing to do with bad behavior. They have more to do with a bad culture, which manifests itself in bad behaviors. So I said, let me look at that. So went on and wrote first a blog post that went viral. The assistant principalship, the most misunderstood and underutilized position in education. And then because it went viral, I went to my publisher and said, look, we got to turn this into a book like quick, and because this is a hot topic. So I did. And as you probably know, the book sold out before it came off the printing press. So they had to print up more copies. So they printed up another 10,000, and they're just about sold out as well. But the point is, assistant principals needed to hear something different from what they had been hearing, what they had been groomed for, to be this full-time disciplinarians, cafeteria duty supervisor, bus duty, all that kind of stuff. You have to be an instructional leader too. So then that just led me naturally to the Saturday Morning Academy, and said, look, let me give up my Saturday mornings for an hour, and really more than an hour, because I spend about 2 hours preparing every Saturday. And let me just talk to the world's assistant principals as best I can, or at least America's, about effective assistant principal leadership. And between the live show or live session and the videos, because I post them, we're averaging about a good 35,000 people watching them each week.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Emma, is that been your experience of that kind of role?
No, when I was a deputy, I still had a class as well. So I was teaching full time and doing the deputy headship at the same time. So I constantly got 1 foot in each camp. I'd got a foot in the teaching, camp, and then a foot in the leadership camp. And it was like, the biggest thing for me was to let go of the fact of you mentioned about being this super teacher. It was really hard to say, I cannot be the teacher I always was, because I've got to do other stuff as well. I can't devote as much thinking time, planning time, prep time. That was really hard. And it's something that I like to share with people who are going into that role in primary now, to say, look, you've just got to accept that you can't be who you were. You've got to become and grow into that new role and leave some of the stuff.
Yeah.
You always know that you can default back to being a great teacher.
Yeah, you always got that.
It's amazing that this instructional leadership is thrown into there. I mean, one of the things I'm fascinated in the style that you have is it's like, it feels like you're just giving people an hour of your time, and you talk. You don't have like fancy slides and graphics and stuff. You're just kind of just talking. Yeah. Do you feel like you get a good response from that approach? Yeah.
I told them one week, I said, look, I'm a professional speaker, because I feel a level of guilt with all of the sessions, because I don't use slides, and I know I've got visual people out there. But as I explained to them about 2 weeks ago, I said, look, you got to understand something. A lot of my clients are watching this too, and they know they've paid me very good money to come out and speak to their groups, their schools, their conferences. I can't give you everything I give them for free, because they see that, right? So I'm just giving you getting the lecture. So you see, when I do the keynotes and the workshops, I'm not doing a lecture. I got PowerPoints and we're engaging in discussions and conversations, all that kind of stuff. I said, I can't give you that, because the clients will see that and like, wait a minute, buddy, we paid you X number of dollars and you sitting at home doing this thing for free?
I thought you were going to say something really like, it's the power of the narrative. It's the.
I'd like to say that, but I'm just being honest. But I will tell you this though. I'll say this much to you about that. I'm aware of my own skill set, right? And I'm also aware of the effect that I have on some, not everybody, because there's some folks out there that can't stand Principal Kafele, right? But but I am aware. So I've learned over the years that I can stand and talk to folks if I bring the right energy, the right charisma, the right enthusiasm, that people will want to sit and listen for hours, right? So that's just something that some of us are able to do, and I'm able to make it work for me on those Saturday mornings. So therefore, I don't have the slides, but the beauty is there's a young aspiring assistant principal from Houston. Her name is Kim Wilson Daniel, and she makes this elaborate chart of everything I say, which is primarily the questions. I give these self-reflective questions, a plethora of them for the hour, and she makes this very fancy chart and posts it on Twitter and Facebook. And now a lot of the listeners, they're not only looking forward to my words, but they're looking forward to her written chart. And then they use that, so I've never met her before. She just somebody that came on and said, here's something to enhance it. And this is what she does. And then with that, there are countless Zoom meetings that occur throughout the week centered around the Saturday talk. And there are countless Twitter chats throughout the week. And the reason I say countless, because they're all inviting me to pop in, and I can't. There's too many of them, right? But they've all got their own in various different districts. And then one of them happens right after I go off on Saturday. They come on and they do a Zoom meeting and they discuss it. So what they're doing is taking notes, and then they're coming back together as teams and then breaking down the content that I deliver based on the needs of their individual schools. So it's a beautiful thing. It's like a national, if not worldwide, community that we've developed, being birthed in this chair that I'm sitting in right now. It's a beautiful thing.
I have to say, honestly, it's like, we always have this feeling on our short show that we could talk to you for a long time, but I just think it's fantastic what you've created there. I love the fact that you've got instructional leadership right up there alongside social justice, and there's this immense passion that you've got for the job, and huge respect you have for teachers and for the students. So honestly, Principal Kafele, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you both. Thank you.
What an amazing interview with Principal Kafele. I know we say it all the time, Tom, but I could have spoken to him all day. That man is absolutely fascinating. Although it did make me laugh at the end when he said he's birthed things from his chair. So I feel like you and I are now the midwives of Principal Kafele, bringing his work to the UK. I was absolutely fascinated, though, about this idea of teaching being a mission. And I think it kind of, for me, it aligned with what Dame Alison Peacock was saying the other week about the role of educators, the role of teachers. What resonated with you, Tom?
I think, I'm fascinated about him in two ways. One of them is this thing that he's very upfront about the social justice aspect, and he's got this incredible backstory where you can read about that in his books and on his videos about his experience as being an African American student in a very white school and experiencing direct racism and then breaking through that. And so he's got that, and his sense that you need to connect with kids and find out about who they are. I think that's really, really important. And sometimes I think we can get a bit too technical in education and think that the students are kind of neutral people that we're just sort of teaching to, and we shouldn't get too stuck in, and teachers can't be expected to. But I sort of feel like when you hear him, you can see why he would advocate that. So there's that whole side. And then there's this whole, really fantastic recognition of the difficult job of being an assistant principal or a middle leader or a deputy head, where you do have to do all these things, but you don't run the school. And he, in the detail of what he writes about and so on, he really gets that job so well.
Yeah, and I like the way, we didn't actually talk about it in the interview, but this idea that all of his book, well, a majority of his books, hinge around this 50 critical questions to ask of that role. And I just think what a brilliant format. And I'd love to talk to him more about this idea of constant reflection and self-evaluation, because he's very much about how you've got to reflect as an educator. And I want to get my hands on some of these books now and start asking myself.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And then he does this show. So he set up this sort of Saturday thing. So he's obviously found there's a time and a place. So Saturday mornings, he just logs in for, it started off as half an hour, but he can't fit it in for half an hour.
Possibly happen on Saturdays, Tom.
Oh, I know, exactly. Yeah, you see all your promoting your stuff. But he actually has made it free. He's made it like free to anyone to just tune in. And you get this experienced guy talking about some very, very practical issues. So, I feel like, very happy to do a big promo here for Principal Kafele's Leadership Academy on Saturday mornings. But he's a top guy. And I think that he thinks some people don't, he might be a bit controversial for some people, but I don't know entirely why. So I'm interested to know what that's about, but we could find out more about that.
I feel like we found a diamond mine, Tom.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to fall down a Principal Kafele wormhole on YouTube for the next 4 days and just emerge inspired.
This is what I love about doing this show, because, till we started doing this and we had an explicit goal to get UK and US people together, the fact is that he has got a lot to offer, a lot of ideas which are totally relevant to teachers here in the UK, and we have this sort of cross-fertilization, and it's so interesting. The more of this that we do, the better.
Yeah, keeping it fresh, Tom, as well.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode, and we hope to see you the next time.